All right, guys, welcome back to the Deal Finders podcast. And I am so excited that we're here today and that you're here to listen because we're going to dive into a hot topic for us. This is our month of going into private capital and how to raise it and how to use it responsibly and what even does it mean. So I have an incredible guest, Rich Lennon, who has been doing this for many years. So we're going to just start with where he came from and then what is he doing now. And it won't take long for y'all to understand that he is the expert. So grab a pen and paper and let's dive in. Rich, thank you for being here. Introduce yourself, maybe 30 seconds. Where are you? Where are you from?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. When you say he's been doing it for a long time, it just makes me feel old. Like, we just say I'm old. That's okay. I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and I've been in real estate investing since about 2011. I was an accidental landlord before that, kind of owned a couple properties with not a lot of intent. And 2011, I started getting into the market and buying everything up and never looked back.
Yeah, that's incredible. And what were you doing before you started buying or when you started buying?
Directly before I was a stay-at-home dad. I was I ran a soccer coaching business, which is effectively like a plumbing business. I would sell other people's time and I would get some arbitrage off of it.
Yeah.
Then I built some online stuff and I was selling other people's stuff and it was profitable, but I hated it. And then I sold it and I didn't do anything. And then when my wife had her third baby, I had stayed home for a couple years, and when she had the third baby, I was like, well, it's time for dad to go back to work.
Yeah. I love
That's what I did.
I love that. That's awesome. So, here on the Deal Finders podcast, I like to ask people, how did you find that first deal, the first investment property that you bought? How did you find that?
Mine, is Craigslist. And I don't know that people still use Craigslist. I just date myself a little bit with that.
Yes, you did.
Even before I actually had bought my first investment property, I had started a bird dog course. I had learned from somebody a bird dog course, and so I was posting on Craigslist, "Hey, I'm looking to train bird dogs how to go find houses for me." And I had this young lady who was a go-getter, and I had created some videos, and she watched them, and she went out and she found the first deal, and I remember it was like $14,000, $12,000. It was somewhere in that ballpark on my first deal. And I just dumped it back into marketing and boom, I was off. That's how it started.
That is incredible. And yes, it kind of dates yourself that it was successful on Craigslist, but we still see people pulling leads out of Craigslist.
Okay.
It's a little bit messier than it used to be. A lot more scam. But every now and again, you can still find some diamonds in there. So, was that deal in your local market? Was it in your town?
It was. And I've always done things locally. And that's not to suggest you can't, because you're well aware that you can do things anywhere in the country these days.
Yeah.
But this was back 2011, maybe a little bit before that time. And yeah, it was local. And to your point there, when you're new to the business, you have to grind. And I just remember doing a lot of hours and going through a lot of the dead leads and going through just a lot of stuff to get there. And so in terms of when you say, hey, there's a lot of spam and there's a lot of work to get them, I was like, I don't know. I kind of felt like that was the same way in 2011. And maybe when everybody's starting, I think there's a lot of that way. There's a lot of spinning those wheels until you find that traction.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so, the reason I asked that question at the beginning of every podcast is because I do believe that starting in your own backyard, in your own community, is the best way to get started. Yes, you can do deals outside of your local market, but why would be my question. When your local market, you have so much of an advantage, the knowledge, the info that people that maybe can get a deal or a discount or something. And you have people that a lot of times people that can help protect you, right? You can trust people because you know them, right? So there's so many benefits to finding the deals in your local community, especially to start out. So
I think that's great advice. I think that everybody should listen to that. I think that's because nowadays, a lot of people do say you can just do this nationwide wholesaling thing, and it is And on one hand, the business is fairly straightforward and simple, but the details are complicated.
Yep.
And you want to sometimes you want to be able to touch it and feel it and be able to go to the problem physically. And local all the way. I totally agree with that.
Yep. I love it. I love it. So, all right, Rich, you did that, and then you were active for about a decade, right? Just buying and selling.
Yeah. I was it's such a naive goal. My goal was to buy one house a year. And then I was going to buy them for 10 years. And then I was going to be wealthier than all my friends in retirement. Like that's how naive I was at what I was going to do. And so it went from one a year to two a year to one a quarter to one a month. And then I eventually got to like 3, 4, 5 a month that I was doing. I did that for a long time. My goal was always to get to 10. I wanted to do 10 deals a month, which I don't know, it's probably not a very smart way to put a goal out there. Most I ever did was 8. And so I didn't achieve the goal, but in the idea that, aim high and you miss, you still did something, something worth doing. Yeah. So I'm one of those stories.
So did you have a team with you, or was this just all you?
Yeah, so at one point I had 14 full-time employees.
Wow.
I started doing virtual assistants in like 2013, 14, 15. So, really a whole decade before we ran into the COVID stuff. And now everybody uses virtual assistants. So I built a lot of what I did at the time. I still had in-house people. Like I had a project manager. I had a COO. So I had some people local, but I had about a team of 14 at one point.
Wow. That's incredible. So yeah, it does take a team when you're talking about 5, 6, 7, 8 deals every single month. It definitely takes a team.
Yeah, it's a machine. In some ways I'm a marketing company. That's what I really am at that point. And then in other ways I'm a construction company, which is, and then a disposition company. You're just running a lot of stuff off. I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah. It's hard to wear all those hats. And we get started and we have to wear all those hats.
Yeah.
But it's a struggle when you have multiple going and the life cycle of a real estate deal. It is nice, and it's actually fairly easy. It's one of the businesses that is very easy to see the definition of the life cycle, and hiring teams and staff to plug in those pieces becomes natural. It makes sense,
Yeah, I mean, the verticals are, you have the acquisitions, dispositions, marketing, finance, property management, project management. But other than that, like those are the verticals. And, have a leader in every vertical, and then a manager for the vertical leaders to point to, and then people working in the verticals. And I'm an engineer by education, and it is very logic based, and it fit my brain pretty well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so fantastic, and I don't want to gloss over all of that because it's some incredible achievements, and you did a lot. But we're here in our our private capital month that we have a local event. It's going to be, I don't know when this podcast is going out, but we do events every month, and this will come up. It's going to be a Tuesday. If y'all are interested, dealfindersclub.com/events. You can check that out and see when the next one is. But we do these free events all the time, local again. So it's a drive anywhere in South Carolina. You could drive to here. But we do these for the community, for new investors, experienced investors to connect with each other, learn the specifics of this business, get some real specialized knowledge, and then, of course, help build the businesses from there. So private capital is a big piece of that. Tell me what your experience is with private capital. Tell me where you are now. Then we're going to go back to how did it get started?
Sure. And let me just say thank you for doing that, by the way. I run a local group as well. They meet once a month. And I think it's such a value add to your community because our business really is a team sport. And we need other investors and other professionals to really be able to execute at a high level. So, I mean, a free event. Anyway, thank you for doing that. I think it's important to the community.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
Let's see, private money. So I was a borrower of a lot of private money. So when I was borrowing 3, 4, 5 a month or whatever it was at the time, I borrowed a lot of money. So there was the borrowing side of this. And then in 2020, when hit the pandemic, for me, the pandemic was very life-changing in that it was early in 2020. I had already met in 2019. I kind of drew an imaginary line in the sand early in my career. And I said, that's the definition of success. If I have that much money or whatever it was, that's what the definition. And I had met that in 2019. So when 2020 came around, I was like, I'm out. I'm going to bounce.
Yeah.
And then I started to lend the money. I flipped seats. I went from voracious appetite as a borrower to, when you're doing all those flips and all that money's out in the street and you stop doing it, all that comes back to you. Now you have these inflated bank accounts, which on the one hand, you're like, wow, that's amazing. Thank God. But then on the other hand, it's what do I do with the money? So I flipped the script. I started being a money lender, and I've been doing that since about halfway through 2020 at a really serious pace. I was growing my IRAs by lending throughout my flipping career.
Sure.
But when I just let all those 14 employees go, except for maybe one or two, they just really transformed into a lender.
Yeah. So I've got to hit on something, and y'all, if you're listening to this, watching this, you can watch this on YouTube and listen anywhere podcasts are. Rich made a a golden nugget there, and it only comes from experienced people like him, not just in real estate, but just in life. Where, Rich, you said you drew a line in the sand, and you said this is where success is. Where did that come from? Was that from a mentor or a coach, or was that just?
No, I always wanted to have money. I didn't come from money. I always come from a very middle to lower middle class. And as a lot of entrepreneurs, we fail a lot before we succeed. And you have to go out, you have to fail as a business person. And I really got into real estate in my mid 30s. So I had experienced failure in my 20s and 30s to figure out business. There were some successes in there, but there were certainly some failures as well. And so I just was like, okay, if I reach this amount of money, all my problems will go away, which is ridiculous to think about. More money, more problems now. But it's just naivete. I was just naive. And I said, I want this number. And, I hit it, and feel blessed to have done so.
So I think the maturity of you, and I think this is where it comes from, the maturity of you, where you said, I hit that number, now I can stop, right? Because a lot of people have that thing, if I just had this amount of money, all my problems are going away. And then like they hit that and they're like, oh, actually I need this. And they don't ever stop. And you just keep going, and you just keep moving the goalpost and adding. What happens is you add expenses, you add overhead, you buy a nice car, house, boat, whatever. But I think the maturity came from, and this is a golden piece for everybody listening, is you had some failure. So you, and maybe asking, I guess, is that failure was real for you. And I think that it was an actual thing. You could really feel that the fact that it could go away.
Yes. Yes. And failure is hard. And I have to win in life. I think that is one of my superpowers. I don't look like it as an old man, but I was an athlete at one point, and I really love to compete.
Yeah.
And and when you lose, it's hard. You get depressed, and it's hard to go and start again. And you can surround yourself with some people that can help you, but ultimately that has to be an internal thing of, I'm going to be successful. And, one of your points about, you draw that line and then you kind of keep going. I do feel like the people that achieve wealth on their own by building it through failure is that they don't necessarily stop on that journey, even though they might stop what they're doing. Like, so I stopped flipping homes and buying rentals, which created my wealth, but I was like, I enjoy it. And obviously I could have stopped at 1 million or 2 million. You could have stopped along the way.
Yeah.
The same people that pushed through, those are the ones who keep building that wealth. And I think it's a good observation of yours.
Yeah. I love that you were able to say, okay, we're going to stop, and you evaluate where you are, and maybe you wanted to keep flipping, but you said, you know what, now's the time that I can transition into something else. That's what I just love about that. And it's just a great tip for anybody that's out there. And this is why we do podcasts like this. This is why we bring great people in, because that insight is just phenomenal. So,
and I will say it's hard in the moment. Like, it's hard in the moment because people don't understand why you're doing it. You're like, wow, you're having success. You're doing all these things. These are team members. These are neighbors. These are family members. Like they don't understand it, and that does make it difficult.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's go back to the private capital because you were using your own. You said IRA, so let's just give the definition of that and briefly how does that work?
Sure. So, the government created IRAs, and we can all contribute to them in if we have earned income that year. And there's like a lot of different categories: Roth IRAs, Coverdales, HSAs, whatever. But they allow the money to be earned tax free. And earned's not the right word because you have to invest, and then you get the investment back.
Right.
And so I was lucky enough early in those 2012, 2013, I met some people who were into the IRAs. And so I was able to build my IRA alongside the LLC money. And you should build both of those things because you're either going to use your IRA money or you're going to be dead before you're 59 and a half. So let's all hope we get there.
Yeah.
But if you do get there, ultimately you can live tax free after that point. And, yeah, so I had been building them up for a long time, and I continue to do so. Now I just do it with a different strategy, and that strategy is an easier one for an old Gen X guy like me. Lending is much easier. It takes a lot less effort, and your money works for you instead of you working for your money. So it's a very good paradigm.
That's awesome. I think it's a good example. And guys, you can always look at some more info on that. We like to use the self-directed IRA, and there's different companies to do that with. But so we just had our support call with our deal partners, which is our program where we help people go from no deals to where we flip 3 houses together and then they graduate to go on their own. We just had that support call and we talked about raising private capital because of this is the month for it. And the first question was, and this was just a great question from an investor who's done a couple of deals. She said, like, where do I even start? Who has it? How do I get private capital? She's got a gap in the funding because of a bad appraisal, just a low appraisal for a flip that she wants to do. And, that question was, well, I don't have private capital. Who has it? What do I do? So can you help with the beginner?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll give 2 pieces of advice. And the first one is mindset. The person who needs the money is the important person in the equation. And most people think about it the other way. Most people think about it as money is the scarcity. That's not true. Money is abundant. Having someone who can adequately work the money is the scarcity. And so if you have a deal and you have the skill set to execute and move my money, you are more important to me than I am to you. And so you get the idea of you are the prom king or you are the prom queen. And you have to believe that to attract the money. Like you are the one who has the higher skill set.
Yeah.
And likely your first private money is going to be in your sphere of influence. And it's not going to be your brother or your sister. We argue with them all the time, or your mother or your child. It's probably not going to be them. But it's going to be somebody around you. And the way to access it is to simply tell people what you're doing with energy. And I'll tell you 2 quick stories of how I got my first 2 private money lenders. One was there was a cookout, a bonfire at my neighbor's house, and we went over there, and they were talking about taxes being raised in our county, Chesterfield County. They were talking about taxes being raised, and I was arguing politely. We were just having a discussion with about 5 people, like, should we vote for the raise in taxes or not? And my argument was like, hey man, I own like 30 houses right now in Chesterfield County. I'm voting for the tax, even though I'm going to pay way more than you are. And we need it for the schools. And I just made an impassioned plea of like, we had to do the infrastructure. The next morning, some lady reached out to me that was there. She gave 0 words to the conversation that was going on at the time. And she said, hey, you know what? My husband and I always wanted to get in real estate, but we really don't have the time, but we had set a couple $100,000 aside. Would you be willing to move that money for me? And I was like, okay.
Wow.
And so like just by talking, I didn't ask her any questions. She didn't even participate in the conversation, but just by talking about it passionately, she was attracted to that. And I'm still moving their money today. I mean, that's 10 plus years later.
Wow.
And the second one was you just be ready to have a conversation with anybody. So I was at my kid's kindergarten birthday party, and my children were in the bounce house. And as a parent, you're afraid the bounce house is going to suddenly fly into the air. So like all the parents staying on the outside, like we're all going to jump on it and hold it or something.
We're going to catch it.
But it's a pretty boring thing to do. And there was just a dad who was standing next to me, and he just asked me, "Hey, what do you do?" And I was like, "Well, I flip houses, but I really probably just move other people's money." And I just said something very casually. And then he asked the follow-up question. He's like, "Well, what does that mean?" I'm like, "Well, I borrow money and I give him a rate." I wasn't thinking I was selling this man on what I was doing, but he self-identified simply because I put into words that I moved other people's money. And when he self-identified, then the conversation went deeper, and like he's still lending to me today as well. So it was, I think some people get the idea like, I got to go ask people for money.
Yeah.
Just talk about what you do with passion, and I think you'll find that money will come to you. And from places you never expected.
Right. Yeah. I love that. That's very similar to the advice I gave, which is great. So we're on the same page here.
Yeah, it's good. It worked out.
Yeah. So, which means it works, right? Because this is the same thing that has worked for us, and it's not like you said. I've never sold the idea of borrowing money or lending money, but it's the people that have the capital and know that they want to make better returns, know that there's options out there. They're just looking for that thing and that person to trust in, or that, activity. So real estate being the primary support here is that we are investing in real estate, which is inherently valuable and trusted, so we have that option. But I want to make sure everybody heard the words you said, which is you move other people's money. I love the way you have that phrased. It tells you exactly what it is, but it seems so approachable versus I've heard other people say like, "Well, I make high returns on investment capital at 10% or more for 18-month term," like so meaty, like, and it's over your head. I love how you made it approachable.
Because I think you want to give people a right to say no without saying no, right? So you want to tease it a little bit, and your client will self-identify.
Yeah.
Because because a lot of 90% won't ask the follow-up, but the 10% that do that are very interested. And like a good one-liner at a cocktail party, and this is a buddy of mine who does this, but the people ask, he'll go up at the cocktail party and he'll be like, "Hey, I have $100,000 and I'm looking to invest. What's your best investment right now?" He would ask them someone, and then they would say, "Oh, well, because everybody likes to talk about their investment," or some people won't, and they'll immediately shut it down, and that's not your client.
Yeah.
But some people will say, "Oh, it's I'm earning 8% or I'm earning 9%," or they get excited about their number, and then you just kind of go, "Oh, I get my investors 10 to 11%." So, and then you just change the conversation, and then your client will self-identify and come back in and say, "How are you earning 10 or 11% on your returns?" And then you open the door for the conversation. I thought he does that very well.
Yeah, I like that. This is great. So we had some other follow-up questions in our support group, and again, I'm teaching a whole lesson on this. So maybe I should just go and ask you all my questions. But the next thing that comes to our mind is, where do we find it? And you said, some great tips there. It's what's next? Well, okay, now this guy has said he's interested. And, and I just picture the people that were asking these questions like, I don't know what I'm doing. You don't know what you're doing. Let's look at each other and try to figure this out. So where do they go from there? Is it an attorney? Is it, Google? What's next?
I'd start with AI. The world of AI right now is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And you can go to ChatGPT and ask these types of questions. It'll give you some advice. But if you're trying to combine money with somebody else, or you're trying to get them to lend, an attorney is the appropriate person. And you need to get a real estate attorney, because not all attorneys are real estate attorneys. I would just look for, in your local RIA, who are the attorneys that are closing all of these wholesale deals, because they're a volume thing and they're very familiar with the contracts and they're very familiar with what you're trying to do. And it can be as simple as just sitting down having a conversation, and you get a note in deed of trust or a note in mortgage, just kind of depending on what state you're in.
Yeah. Yep.
It's very straightforward.
That's great. And the next questions that come up are, well, what are the rates? What are the terms? And I know what you're probably going to say, but I'll give you the chance to say, what do people do for private lending notes and terms? And
I lend at 13% and 3 points for 6 months, which is effectively 20%. I would never borrow at higher than 9 or 10%. So as a lender, you have a different thing as a borrower, and at this point with the volume that I do, I'm more of a professional lender at this point. But your best bet is to start with someone who's a true private money lender. And, I think a fair rate in today's market is somewhere around 10%. You have mortgage rates in a bank that are 7%. You have the U.S. Treasury, which is about a little over 4% right now. And so the stock market's going the other direction right now. So, if you say, okay, I'm going to give you a first position note, deed of trust, or mortgage at 10%, I think that's a good deal for everybody.
Yeah.
And all terms are negotiable. You can negotiate not having monthly payments, which is very valuable for the borrower, slightly riskier for the lender. But you can structure it just a lot of different ways to really fit what you need.
Yeah, that's great advice right there, which is basically, I think what I was saying to our group was, it's all negotiable, but remember, what are you negotiating against? We're negotiating against the other options, right? And if you look at hard money today and you just go online and see what the hard money rate, it's not hard to do. And we can say that's our baseline. Well, we are willing to pay, and I don't want everybody to know this, we're willing to pay more than hard money rates if we don't have to pay monthly payments. If you're going to be an easy private lender where I don't have to worry about, sending you all the documents and the appraisals and all this back and forth, just to stop emailing 15 times, I'll pay you more. Yeah,
I think so. Totally agree.
And so we kind of are going back and forth with that. But then also who the lender is, what are their other options? If everything they're invested in now is making 5%, and you come to them and say, I'll give you 15, they're going to probably look at you and say, something's fishy. I'm not.
Yeah, they're going to think it's too high.
It's too high.
Right.
But if you went to them and said, we could do 8, now they're happy and it's, more real to them, it doesn't feel fishy. Whereas if we borrow from other active investors like yourself, 15 and 20% is going to be like, you better be there or not.
You got to be on that.
You got to at least be there. So it's really, it is a balance and it is a negotiation. But ultimately, and this is kind of where we are, and I think you're probably the same mentality, is that we're serving our community. We're serving that lender by giving them the option to participate in this and do better than what they're doing now. And if you go at it like that, I think you're going to win.
Yeah, and you really have to have that mindset of you are the prom king or the prom queen. Like you give me more value moving my money than I give you by giving you the money. I'll tell you that from the person who sat on both sides of the table a lot. And that is a difficult mindset to accept at times. And I'll throw out one last thing here is that don't be afraid to use those hard money lenders, particularly early in your career. And the number one reason that I might suggest that, other than being a hard money lender, is that they will keep you out of trouble. So they're going to underwrite your deal and they're going to make sure that you're not, because they'll protect their money in a way that maybe a private, non-experienced lender won't do. That private, unexperienced lender will just assume that you're doing everything correct. Mm-hmm. That professional money lender will make sure you're doing everything correct. So if you're new, private money is probably a good option for a couple deals until you really have your feet under you. Because last thing you want to do is lose your neighbor's money. That's extremely awkward. You're going to get money at the mailbox. Yeah. But anyway, it's not all about the percentage and the return. And you hit on a couple of them of like, hey, sometimes no payments is better. Yeah. And so don't always be concerned about that interest rate. It really is about the lender. Like, are they? Are they gonna help you when the time comes, or are they gonna like put you out to the dogs?
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And again, that comes from tons and tons of experience on both sides. So I really appreciate that. Rich, we're coming up on time, and again, I feel like we could talk about this all day long. This is so good. It's just such the lifeblood of our business, raise capital and going and raising private capital because it's there. It's everywhere. Is such a good growth strategy for investors. What do you have any last minute tips or thoughts for our audience?
No, if you don't mind, I just throw out a little bit what I do now.
Yeah.
All those people that I was borrowing money from, all those flips, when I stopped buying the flips, they got mad at me. They're like, "Hey man, you've been moving my money for a long time. Why aren't you moving my money?" And so I started combining their money with my money and lending that money. And so I make like 30 to 50% returns when I lend, because I still give them that 8 or 9%, but I'm charging 20%. So I get my money in the arbitrage. So you can find me at richlennon.com, RICHLENNON.com. And there's something called the Smarter Wealth Blueprint that really breaks down lending for you. And you download it, check it out, and it might answer some people's questions on like, how does the lending work? And it might be helpful to your audience.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And so is the website the best way to get a hold of you as well, or is like socials or okay?
Yeah, emails are where things go to die. And I don't give out my phone number anymore. It just goes to the lady who runs my office. So the best way is to go to richlennon.com, and you can book a call there. So you can, if you like what you find and you're like, "Oh, I'm kind of curious," you can book a call, and it's a free 30-minute call, and I could talk lending forever somehow.
Yeah, that's amazing. I really, really appreciate it, Rich, and guys, gals. This is the Deal Finders podcast. We are going to do, we do interviews like this all the time, and we try to keep it on topic and on point for you as investors getting started or scaling, going to the next couple of deals. So again, I could be here. I could ask questions all day long. I've got so much more to cover, but we got to cut it short so we can move on. And Rich, thank you so much for being here with us. And you can go to dealfindersclub.com for our events, for any information, or to connect with myself or our team. And listen, if you are looking to build, if you've got all the knowledge, you've been learning, and you are trying to get to the next step, there is a button there where we could chat, or you can apply to join our mentorship. And we'd love for you to take out that application. So we'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening to the REI Deal Finders podcast. You can find out more and apply to be a part of the REI Deal Finder community at reidealfinders.club.